Is fasting or cold therapy better to convert white fat to brown fat? I don't, I think if you're trying to convert white fat to brown fat so that you can burn it better, I think the best thing that you can do is fasting. You do cold, you could do either one. They're both good. One of the things I like to do is not necessarily ice baths, as in, depending on what kind of cold therapy you're talking about, because there are levels of cold therapy, but ice baths, pretty cold, and some people get in cryo chambers, and some people, take cold showers, super cold showers, and all of those things can be effective strategies. Is carob okay as a chocolate substitute? Yes and no. Carob is a legume, and so some people do react to it or don't digest it very well. It's hard to break down. So you just have to assess it for yourself if you haven't been tested. But carob is gluten-free, so in that regard, it's okay as a chocolate substitute and as a caffeine-free version of chocolate, or something that resembles chocolate. I have celiac. I lost 10 pounds in 2 years, a mainstay at 145. Is that an indication that I may be handling this disease well? Karen, I could answer that better if I knew how tall you were. But losing 10 pounds in 2 years is relative, because if you started out, let's say, for example, you're 5'2", if you're 145 pounds, you're overweight by about 20 pounds. Unless you're 145 with heavy muscle density. So your height does matter there. It's an indication, not really of much, if it's just 10 pounds of general weight loss, because a lot of people that find out they're celiac and go on a gluten-free diet, they're going to lose weight in that especially in that first 6 months, mainly because they're reducing their inflammatory burden. And so a lot of times we lose weight and it's water weight. It's not actually fat that we're losing definitively, because the devil's in the details there. Is losing too much water weight too quickly not safe? Low blood pressure, dehydration? No. We'll define too much. If you're doing something like no grain, no pain, you're not going to lose too much too quick. I would argue the opposite. If you're taking a diuretic and your dose is increased by your doctor, you could actually create a greater loss and a greater problem, usually with medications, than you can with diet change. How many pounds of muscle do we gain in a month of heavy training, men versus women? I wish I could give you more exact, Dahlia. It's not an exact number. It's not how many pounds of muscle. I generally, what I try to have people do is analyze their body fat composition when they start. And there are scales that you can buy. Tanita, Tanita is a good company. They make a really good body fat scale. But if you're going to do body fat measurements, however you do it the same way each time you measure. Don't like one day have your your trainer do fat calipers on you, and then the next time you're measuring it with a handheld device, and the next time you're measuring it with a body fat scale. However you measure it the same way each time for consistency's sake. But, if you're, depending on how overweight you are, how under-muscled you are, again, and how hard you train, there's so many variables within that question that there's not like a magic number. If you are overweight, let's say you're 20, 25 pounds overweight, what's a safe digression of weight? About a pound a week, and that includes if you're putting muscle on during that process. So as you gain a little bit of muscle, you should still average, if you're doing it where it's going to last you and have long-term lasting effects, you should be losing about a pound a week. Now, some people will have more than that initially if they're really obese. We'll see like I've seen people in a month, I've seen them lose 35, 40 pounds just like that, just because they were so overweight to start with. So again, part of it depends too on where you're starting. Can BCAA and L-carnitine help me gain more muscle? Branched chain amino acids, that's what BCAA stands for those of you who don't know. Yes, BCAA, it's not that they help you gain more muscle, it's that they help you recover from your workout. So, if you're working out and you're doing resistance training and your muscles are getting so sore, this is what happens to some people is they're malnourished, they go work out, they get so sore they can't walk for a week. This is where something like branched-chain amino acids can really help in your recovery. Branched-chain amino acids, when you take them after your workout, within an hour after your workout, they can be very, very effective at helping reduce delayed onset muscle soreness and helping you recover better. And when you recover better, you put on muscle quicker. So in that regard, yes. Not so much L-carnitine. L-carnitine's job is it's a taxi for fat. It shuttles fat into the mitochondria for breakdown, for something called beta oxidation. So it taxicabs the fat into the right location to break it down as energy. It doesn't so much though help with pure muscle growth. I'd say in my experience, if you're talking about supplements, if you really are trying to put mass on, there are certain supplements that can help you do that. I'll give you a quick list of them here. L-glutamine is one of them. L-glutamine, branched-chain amino acids, overall getting adequate protein in your diet. This is where a lot of people fail. They get enough fat, they get enough carb, but they're way under on their protein. You really, if you're trying to put on mass, 1.6 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So, you know, most people are somewhere around 0.8 grams per kilogram of protein in their diets when they count, at least in my experience. And so they're half the protein that they need or require to build lean mass is not being consumed in the diet. And so they really have to bump the protein levels up. Branched-chain amino acids, as I said earlier, help you recover. So does glutamine. Glutamine is, when you work out, when you lift weight, glutamine is the first amino acid that leaves the muscle. And so you want to replace that after a workout. So anywhere between 2 and 5 grams, depending on your size, of glutamine after a workout. And you got to be careful, because if you take too much too quick, it give you a headache. You take too much too quick, it give you diarrhea. So always say start low and build your way up and see how well your bowels tolerate it, because some people, again, get to 3 grams, and that's plenty. If they try to go to 5, they start having bowel problems. So again, caution there. Branch chains, 6 grams of branched chain amino acids is a good amount to get in post-recovery, and then adequate protein. I've listed the number there. And then another supplement that's very effective is creatine monohydrate. And this is, you know, the bodybuilding world has really capitalized on this supplement over the years. It's one of the most effective supplements with some of the most proven research of effectiveness. Creatine monohydrate is not dangerous. It doesn't hurt your kidneys. There's no toxicity if you take it right. And so it's very, very safe, but it's also extremely effective at allowing you to put on more mass in shorter periods of time. So creatine monohydrate for the average person, 5 grams a day, again, taken post-workout, is a good dose to look for. But those are just good places to start if you just aren't sure what to take, because if you ever open up, you know, I don't know how many of you listening ever look at like the web blogs for body weight and bodybuilding, but there's a lot of garbage in that world. There's a lot of junk science, and there's a lot of junk product that's loaded with sugar and loaded with inflammatory ingredients. A lot of the supplements are coated with sugars and artificial sweeteners and dairy-based fillers and grain-based fillers. And so the act of using those supplements can actually create inflammation, you know, for those of us in the gluten-free realm. Let's see here. So, question on how to increase iron absorption when ferritin is low, regardless of eating more iron-rich food. Increase your vitamin C. Vitamin C enhances iron absorption from the food that you eat. And if you're not eating organ meat, that's one of the best ways to get dietary iron in. But the other thing there, Yasmin, is you may not have an iron problem. Low ferritin doesn't always mean iron deficiency. So I don't know if you've measured other parameters of your nutrition, but you may not need necessarily more iron if your ferritin is low. You may, but there are nuances to that. It may not mean what you think it does. Do we need to worry about osteoporosis if we don't eat enough collagen? No. No, I mean, you should, what is enough collagen? I don't think there's ever been anybody who's tried to analyze how much collagen a human should eat in a day to not have osteoporosis. So I don't even know how we would begin to qualify that question in terms of what does it mean to eat enough. So maybe ask it more specifically if you had something else in mind. Russ, does a smiling face help reduce cortisol levels? It sure does. I should probably smile more when we talk. I don't know if that was a subtle hint. Let's see. Is organic mustard okay to eat? Depends, Diana, on what it's made from. A lot of your mustards are white vinegar. And so again, that's generally, most white vinegars are corn derivative, so I don't recommend it. Now, there are some great mustards that are made from apple cider vinegar, you know, and that would be perfectly fine, but you just got to watch out for that white vinegar if it is a corn derivative. So Pam's saying, I might be eating some wrong foods to cause it, but I do believe I have a yeast infection. Can sticking to the no grain and foods for 30-day challenge heal that up, or do I need to do more? I've always gone to a medical doctor, but would rather not if it's avoidable. Could this infection also be causing the weight to stay on? Yeah, I mean, yeast overgrowth is a major contributor. One of the things, we've talked about this a number of times, Pam, yeast produce proteins that mimic gluten. So if you've got a yeast overgrowth, even if you're on the no grain diet, your body could be behaving and reacting as if it's getting gluten exposure. Sometimes if a person has a robust immune system, diet changes enough to balance out the gut flora, sometimes not. So it just depends. There's some natural things that you can do to kind of help stabilize and balance the gut flora. And one of them is caprylic acid. Caprylic acid is a supplement that has a lot of antifungal properties, and that can help bring balance back to your microbiome. We have a product called Ultra Caprylic Acid. We also have a supplement called Yeast Shield, which is, again, it's got a number of different herbals in it that can help with that process. And those things can be very effective for a lot of people, but it ultimately just depends on how bad your situation is. How can I get enough protein on this diet without beans, peas, legumes, dairy, without eating meat 2 times a day? One of the best ways is to do free-form amino acids. Free-form amino acids are basically non-meat-based essential amino acids and other amino acids. I have a formula, let's change that color, called Ultra Aminos. And, you know, a lot of people do well with that as an addition to getting more protein in their diet. We also have a formula, it's a vegetarian-based formula. We can put a link up, but it's a vegan protein powder that you can add to your diet. We just changed the name of it, so I don't, I'm having a brain fart here on the name. Mel, can you pull that up, maybe put that, it used to be Ultra Protein, but I think we call it Warrior Protein now. But it's an organic, easy to digest protein, and that may be another way you can get your protein levels up when you're following the diet and trying to avoid certain foods. Let's see, we'll go down on the left. Is it true that organ meats are more nutritious than vegetables? Yes and no. It depends on the quality of the organ meat, and it also depends on the quality of the vegetable. I would argue that there's merit to both sides of that conversation. I know a lot of the carnivore advocates will tell you that pound for pound organ meat's better than vegetable. I say it depends on where the vegetable was grown, what soil it was grown in, how healthy it is when it was harvested, whether it was sprayed or whether there were any chemicals used in the processing of it. All that matters. But I think pound for pound, I think the best diet, the most nutritionally dense diet would be real food, right? Including a diet that had organ meats and vegetables in it as well. Can eating grain make me susceptible to mold? I am gluten sensitive and have mold issues. So yes, grains oftentimes are contaminated with mold and mycotoxins. It's very, very common. There's originally years ago, there was a condition called bread madness. And one of the causes of bread madness was grain. Obviously the term bread, right, madness, but it was grain contaminated with a type of mold called ergot, which had different chemical compounds in it that would cause hallucinogenic effects. So, there definitely, grains can be contaminated with mold. And some people actually wrote in depth about that in No Grain, No Pain, the mold issues within the grain itself. Let's see, go down a little bit more on that. Let's see, if I have to avoid grains on top of having discarded gluten because I have celiac, then what am I going to eat? Melvin, that's a great question. What I would encourage you to do is go back and watch the last few shows, and if you haven't already, read No Grain, No Pain. There's a list of all the foods. So, you know, one of the things is, okay, what do I avoid? And then the other is, what do I eat, right? So we know what to avoid. What are my other options? Literally, there are over 300 options of fruits, vegetables, nuts, and meats that can be consumed on the No Grain, No Pain diet. So there's a ton of diversity in the diet. It's just you have to make yourself more familiar with it and more familiar around your taste buds, right? Creating recipes and things that might be beneficial. The other thing I would encourage you to do, Melvin, is go to Gluten-Free Society. At the top, there's a menu that says recipes. Click on that, and you can categorize the recipes by diet type, by what you're trying to follow. But there are over 250 recipes there that might give you some great ideas on how to better eat while navigating the diet. Is there a test to see if you have antibodies for the not talked about virus? Not talking about a PCR. Yeah, there's a testing. I mean, we do tests that that measure, you know, the disease that shall not be named. We measure IgG and IgM antibodies to the spike protein and to the capsid proteins to see if somebody has had exposure. So those tests are readily available. I mean, you can ask, most doctors today know about them and will run them or can run them. So Barbara's saying, if you plateau to get tested, but for what or what kind of testing? So if you're plateauing and you're doing all these things, so you should be tested for food sensitivity to make sure you're not sabotaging yourself by eating an otherwise healthy food that isn't healthy for you. You should have your micronutrition levels tested to make sure you don't have any deficiencies that are contributing to, you know, to your inability to have good progress. So those are the two main tests that I would encourage you to look for. Let's see. My doctor told me, I know you want to find the cause of your migraines, but I defer to your neurologist. Protocol is injection if days of migraine are over 15 days. Yeah, there wasn't a question in that, more of just, I think, commentary. Yeah, I mean, how much sense does that make? We don't want to ask why, we just want to give you something. If we don't know why the disease is there, then why would we know how to fix it? That was always what confused me in the medical community. Is glycerine safe to eat every day? In what way and in what quantity? If you're using dried sugar-free cranberries with glycerine, I'd say you're probably okay. Quantity, you know, specific quantities. You know, if you're half a cup or less, I think you'd be fine. What nutrient deficiency can be caused by taking channel blockers? Define channel blockers. What are you referring to? Is that a product? Is that something that I'm not aware of that term in the way you're using it, or maybe there's a misspell there. Metformin depletes B12. Yep, thiazide depletes magnesium. Both true statements. How would you approach small fiber neuropathy? Same way I approach anybody's problem, is you got to get to the core reasons of why it happened. I mean, small fiber neuropathy is a demyelinating neurological disease or a damaged nerve. There are a number of reasons why nerves can be damaged. Most of those reasons, or not most, but many of those reasons may be food-based. Eating food that causes an inflammatory process within the nerve itself. You could have malnourishment, B12 deficiency, you could have B1 deficiency. There are a number of nutrients deficiencies that can lead to small fiber neuropathy. You can also have heavy metal exposures or other chemical exposures that are damaging your nerves. It's not uncommon to see that occur with heavy pesticide exposure. So, I mean, we would measure all those things. We'd be very objective and measure those things to see, you know, what it was that was contributing to it for you. Hey, if you've got a functional medicine or health question that you'd like me to answer for you, make sure you send me an email, glutenology@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to create a video answer just for you. Have a great day.